my real great pleasure now to introduce what may be perhaps our favorite panel of the whole conference. We've been doing this now for 4 years, and this is the Unmentionables. And here she is from her day job, which is something like chief visionary and chairman of the board at Eliza Corporation. But her real job is, you know, thrilling us all in the world of American healthcare. The queen of the Unmentionables, Alexandra Drain. Alex. Woo!
Thank you. So I think the only thing likely that is more nerve-wracking than standing up here right now is standing up here knowing that many of you have this expectation that the Unmentionables panel is going to be 90 minutes of insanity and crazy business and naughty things. I just wanted to remind people who were here actually 4 years ago when we got started that when Susanna did her first part of the panel, what she talked about, actually, what she said was specifically, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I'm intrigued that over the last 3 to 4 years, that has somehow been translated into research sex, talk about sex, have sex. And I will own that absolutely this is a part of the Unmentionables, but ladies and gentlemen, it's not the entire thing. And so we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about sort of the whole arc of the Unmentionables, of which this is certainly a component, and we will take this diversion. But what we really want to talk about today is something that I think has been a theme for many of you, certainly in a lot of what we've been seeing over the last day and a half, but the concept that health is life, care, absolutely, and empathy, always. So why do we keep coming back to this concept, and why is this something that a number of us seem to care about so ferociously? Well, it's based on a couple things. The first being that for most people in the healthcare industry, it's a very mission-driven thing, right? We're doing this because we passionately believe in it. We really want to make a difference in people's lives. We want to influence these headlines and help people be healthier. And in this crowd today, there are a number of people who have shown that they can influence that. If you could take a specific goal or a population, in fact, you can bend trend and make an influence. But a theme of the Unmentionables over the last 4 years has been this very sobering realization that this slide of headlines, which again is for many of us why we do what we do and why we get up every day, we could have shown the exact same slide 20 years ago, and if anything, it would have been better. So one interpretation of that is, although we're all working very hard to make a difference to influence health, maybe we're not having the impact that we want to. So at Eliza, we became obsessed with this question, and I'm going to run through for you really quickly the origination of some of the research that we were doing, and then show a lot of the new stuff that we've been uncovering over the last year. So when we reach out to individuals over whatever medium, we've done that got over 1 billion interactions now, a recurring theme is when we say to somebody, hey, go take care of your diabetes, or go see your doctor, or get a mammogram, or get a colon cancer screening, very rarely does somebody say, I'm not going to because I don't believe in it, or I'm not going to because I don't care. What they say is, oh, I would love to do that, but I can't because my husband just lost his job, or I'm caring for an aging parent. And so what we came to believe is that maybe, while these are the traditional health challenges, problems that most of us are used to focusing on, perhaps, in fact, at least additionally, if not maybe most importantly, these are the diseases that we should be spending time on. Things like being a caregiver, financial stress, not getting enough action, having too much to drink, right? Maybe these are some of the underlying reasons that we're not bending that trend as much or as quickly as we wanted to. This is also something we're all tracking. I'm sure you guys are feeling this also very well summed up by Brené Brown, who is a woman who's been gaining popularity for obvious reasons, and I think she summed it up well when she said, over the past decade, I've witnessed major shifts in the zeitgeist of our country. I've seen it in the data, and honestly, I've seen it in the faces of the people that I meet, interview, and talk to. The world has never been an easy place, but the past decade has been traumatic for so many people that it's made changes in our culture. And many of us see this, right, in the headlines around us. And we put this slide together a while ago, and we don't have the heart, genuinely, to keep updating it, because you could just keep updating it. And we see the combination of these two factors, both the life challenges, the real-life events that happen to folks, coupled with perhaps we're living at a time that feels unusually hard, play out with individuals. And this is a comment that we got from one woman who we were reaching out to speak with her about her diabetes, but we have tens of thousands of these, literally. She said, when one gets tied up with taking care of another family member, 94 years of age, energy goes there. And I'm going to have to balance this out because I will lose too. I'm so glad I followed up on the call. I'll do both of these. I will talk to my doctor and I will follow through. And yes, I know I need some help in the diabetes area. I really have to pay attention to this. This is ridiculous. I don't want to go down any further. So that was the kickoff to what has been now a reasonably exhaustive research process that we partnered with Wendy Lynch from Altarum, who'll come up and share some really interesting data very quickly. The first thing we want to do was check and see whether or not these issues were true for people and what was the prevalence. So what you're looking at right here is demographically significant, statistically significant, demographically representative. When we asked folks, are any of these unmentionables, which are down the left side of the slide, true for you? 95% of people said yes to at least one, and 40% said between 4 and 6. The next thing we wanted to get at was to see what the literature says, which is these things influence health on a very single string basis. Well, holistically, collectively, were they impacting health? And what we saw was people who reported having 4 or 5 unmentionables were over 5 times more likely to report bad health. And the reverse was true. We also saw the presence of something that we've come to call magnifiers, which you can think of as negative coping factors. So when something bad happens, these are the behaviors that can serve to sort of spin you down further. I'm sure most people in the audience, I know this happens to me, you know, I'll get in a snit about something at work, I got home, I have 3 glasses of wine instead of 1, then I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and my mind starts racing and I'm having an argument with myself and then I don't sleep and then I'm depressed and this cycle goes on. We also know people who, when bad things happen, they appear remarkably resilient, and you can think of these as positive coping factors. And the literature refers to these things as the top 3, and our research supported this as well: a strong network of peers, a strong sense of spirituality, and exercise. And originally, we thought the exercise thing was kind of bunk. It turns out to really be true. And it doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and work out for an hour. It just means that when you're really strung out in that moment, just get up and move around a little bit, and that's really important for your body. What was interesting that we weren't smart enough to tease out, but Wendy did, was it was the balance of these 2 things on an individual basis that was most predictive. Specifically, if you had a high ratio of bad coping factors to good coping factors, you were that much sicker. So we took this out to a lot of our partners who are big health plans, big PBMs, big delivery systems, big employers, and said, what do you think about this? Isn't this so cool? And most people said, we do. What are you going to do about it? And we said, we don't know yet. We'll get back to you. So we came back and we kept noodling on this concept, like, what does this mean and what does this represent and what do we do about it? And the word vulnerability kept coming up. So we decided, what if we could do an index that would let us actually lay out a population in a world of limited resources where we could better understand who's really having some of these challenges. But we had to figure out, of these unmentionables, which we should include. So 2 didn't make the grade. We shared this with you guys last year. The 2 were sort of the blue elephants in the corner. One is sex, because for the most part people felt that this industry is not ready to talk about that. And the other being job stress, and that reason being, you know, most of the employers that we talked to said, we know that everybody hates their job. There's just nothing we can do about that, so we don't really want to ask them about it yet. So the vulnerability index became an algorithm that looks at the balance of 3 things. 1, the presence and magnitude of these life challenges, specifically to start caregiving, financial stress, and relationship stress, against your personal sort of resiliency factor, your balance of positive to negative coping factors. And what we showed was that you can, in fact, lay out a population. And it doesn't really matter what you put down the y-axis. No matter what, people who are highly vulnerable are having a harder time. So this is where we left you last year. Wendy's going to come out and explain to you what we've now seen, that we have claims. We've gone live with a number of partners across the country and across the delivery system. And I'm just going to show you a couple other things that we've seen before she does that. So a couple things. The first is, it does appear that there is a lot of vulnerability out there. The second thing is that even within what we would consider a homogeneous population, let's take, for example, the commercial population, the first 4 that you're looking at are all employers, there's still variability in vulnerability. And as you go across to the right and you see that vulnerability is getting higher and higher and higher, you're looking at a Medicaid population, a dual eligible population, and then a population that we looked at for something that the government was interested in. The other thing that we saw, I'm sure some of you guys have heard about the U-shaped satisfaction curve, which basically says that we all go along in our lives happy, 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 and then we sort of hit our 30s and we have this terrible trough, and then we sort of wallow around miserably for a little bit, and then we sort of climb back up in our 60s. So the idea being that the middle of your life is sort of a marker for life kind of sucking. So we thought, well, vulnerability is probably a marker for that. So what if we reversed the happiness curve and called it the unhappiness curve, and to check to see if we saw that same pattern with our vulnerability data? And in fact, we did. when you look, you see the same pattern across the board that the middle of life appears to be causing people a harder time. Also, we know that the middle of life is sort of when a lot of things happen. For example, the sandwich generation. More and more of us are caring for children and also caring for aging parents, and that's an enormous burden and can be very isolating. Traditionally, we've thought of caregiving as largely a female responsibility. A couple interesting other things that we saw in the data refute that. Specifically, in the Medicaid population, more men are reporting issues with caregiver stress than women. We also saw that, counter to what we expected, we thought maybe men would not share as much about this, or maybe in fact they were handling stress better. Au contraire, men in the Medicaid population reported higher vulnerability overall compared to women. The idea of cultural disparities is not a new one, so this is probably something we expected to see, and I would imagine you guys would expect to see, that people who are speaking Spanish, marker probably for being Hispanic, in fact were highly vulnerable to a reasonable extent. And for all of us in the audience, many of us live in urban areas, and probably I know I spend a lot of my time tearing my hair out. In fact, those who live in urban areas are more highly vulnerable and having a harder time. Vulnerability appears to also influence the way that you interact with the healthcare system. So you can imagine increasingly why all these things matter, because if you're trying to do population health management, if you're trying to build a relationship with people, if you're trying to build rapport, understanding what might be driving their behavior and understanding what that result of that might actually be influencing. For example, do I like my doctor? And what we see is that highly vulnerable individuals are less likely to have a doctor that they work well with, and as importantly, they're less likely to sort of follow the rules. They're less likely to go to a doctor who's in network. A question that we get asked all the time is, oh my gosh, this is so interesting, this is great, but there's no way people are going to answer these questions. There's no way. What we've actually seen is, in fact, they do. Not only do they, to the tune, as you're looking there, of close to 90%, but in fact, the process of answering these questions increases satisfaction. So this is an average satisfaction rating from ELISA for the dual-eligible population, which typically is around 72%. And when we added in vulnerability, it went to 94%. And we've never, ever seen a statistic like that with a dual-eligible population. And what we heard anecdotally from individuals was, thank you for finally asking me about the things that matter to me. I'm so grateful to be able to answer these questions. And so what is it that's at the root of that 72 to 94% difference? Well, it's a principle that's very fundamental to good design, which is this concept of empathy, right? The vast majority of people out there are not taking care of themselves, not doing the right preventive things, ending up with diabetes because they want to, or because they're cavalier, or because they don't care. They are because they don't have an alternative, because their life is hard. And so if what we're all trying to do, which I know we are, is design products and solutions that actually influence people, engage them, seduce them into taking better care of themselves, we need to have empathy first. Now, just in case that's not enough of an influence for you, I'll share, we looked at this because this is the #1 design tenet from Apple, actually. But I know if we took this to most of our customers, they would sort of pat us on the head and be like, it's great that you care about empathy, but I care about risk and cost and disease.